Welcome back to another video, people. It feels like I haven't recorded in a really long time because, we've been working on the podcast and etc. Which, by the way, I wanted to thank you so much for all of those of you that have checked out the podcast. I really appreciate it. Links will be down below for it. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, you can tune in with Nighthawks on YouTube or Spotify. But podcast aside, today we're going to be talking about a photographer that that's been on my list for a really long time. His name is Bruno Barbey. However, I didn't want to make a video where I just basically talk about his career and etc. I wanted to be a bit more giving in terms of information and in terms of the things we can learn from him. So I decided to give a little bit of a brief of who he is and what he's done, but then select 3 different projects that we will see as I talk about them, different tools and techniques that Bruno Barbey has used for his storytelling and in order to build his images. And I think this is super important for us when we're trying to learn and trying to, grasp more things about photography from an artistic perspective. So without further ado, grab a drink, make yourself comfortable, and let's go straight to another video. Bruno Barbey is a Moroccan-born photographer of French and Swiss nationality. He became well known due to his association with Magnum, whom he first became linked with, eventually serving as its president for Magnum International from 1992 until 1995. Nonetheless, his most precious merit comes in the form of the images he captured throughout his career. And Barbey's career was a long one. He photographed different conflicts in Nigeria, Vietnam, Bangladesh. From the Middle East to Northern Ireland, he photographed the civil unrest in France during May 1968. However, he rejected the title of war photographer, as he recognized that at the basis of many of these conflicts was the fight for freedom, which is, in essence, a part of life. And during my research, I found out that these images of conflicts and civil unrest were a smaller part of his career. And actually, he dedicated more than 50 years of his lifetime traveling across the globe, making photographs of different cultures, different people, different places, identities, or cultural identities in this case. So it's really, really important to highlight this when we talk about his work, because there's a deep understanding and a deep wanting to represent humanity in a way, a deep love for humanity. And he describes many of the books that he put out. He put out right around 30 books, photography books, and he describes them as documents of the beauty of life. And Barbey's deep love for life and humanity, as many described him to have, it's also translated, I believe, in his capacity to build different photographic languages, employing different techniques and adopting innovative tools. For instance, Bruno Barbey was one of the pioneers of color film in photojournalism, which he adopted in 1966 when shooting for Vogue in Brazil. And he explained his thought process there. Quote, "I had brought a lot of film, including Kodachrome. I started working with this film, which is very slow but resistant to the heat and humidity that I faced in Brazil. And this would mark an important shift for his career as he began to choose color as his primary medium, and we'll see how he works with color so well." Now, I want us to stop here because I want to bring us a little bit back in the Bruno Barbey timeline, as I want us to take time and explore one of his first photographic projects titled The Italians. Now, this is a very early in his career. He started photographing in Italy around 1961, and he finished this project around 1964. So right before his embrace of color, which would be from 1966 onward. And I find this very interesting because Barbey at the time was quote unquote fresh out of college. He actually had studied photography and graphic arts in Switzerland. And, he had traveled to Italy before, and he was extremely fascinated with Italian people and their culture. In some articles that I read, he talked about the fascination for the dramatics, the theatrics of Italian people, more so in the way they express themselves, they behaved, the emotion that is in the surface of how they respond to things. So this is very interesting, and it's exactly what we'll see in these images. Let us not forget that at this point in time, Italy was still recovering from the extreme damages suffered during World War II. And Barbey, heavily inspired by Robert Frank's The Americans, decided to travel through different parts of the country, capturing its people and their love for life. Within this project, there are 3 important aspects related to storytelling that I would like to shed some light on. Movement, theatrics, and the importance of drama in photography, particularly when we're trying to convey a feeling or a story through an image. When we look at these photos of Italy, we realize that most of its weight, or power for lack of a better word, relies precisely on these 3 elements. The photographer mixes himself with the crowd. He eliminates the barriers with his subjects by focusing on proximity and their movement. So this is most definitely something of importance to retain and apply to our photography. However, another important aspect that I would like to talk about is drama. Now, to define drama is often complicated because we tend to entangle it with theater, plays, and film. But when looking on Merriam-Webster, I found a definition that most definitely can bring perspective to us photographers. And in there, drama is described as, quote, the possible situation or series of events involving interesting or intense conflict of forces. And the word that stuck with me was conflict. Looking at these photos, I can identify several situations where it is precisely an idea of conflict that is present, whether that is in conflicting expressions, conflicting numbers, conflicting directions. So conflict is a really good idea to retain here to possibly apply to our photography. So these were the aspects that I thought were relevant to talk about briefly in terms of storytelling. But wait until the end of the video because I will kind of leave you with a choice to make where you can choose something that we'll do in the next video or in a future video of the channel. But now let's talk about Morocco, or rather the Morocco photos of Bruno Barbey. Now, Barbey was born in Morocco and he spent some time of his youth there. And so he was fascinated with the country's culture and with the nuances of its culture as well, because it differs from region to region, from my understanding. And also it was very interesting that, he took his first trip back in 1972 to Fez, I believe, a city named Fez. And he decided to start this project that would take years and years, and in fact did take many years to put together, where he would be capturing Morocco and Moroccan society as it evolved and changed, considering these were modern times and many of Moroccan costumes and cultural aspects are definitely quite ancient, quite traditional. So it's very interesting, and the images we're about to see are most definitely extremely, I would say, strong and highlight these aspects. And he said about the Moroccan people that, quote, the Moroccans have so far succeeded in preserving their sense of human society and humanity with nature. They have adapted to the quote-unquote modern world while retaining their own culture. And the truth is that what I find in Barbey's images is most definitely an affection for a slower pace of life, an admiration for a culture that is more connected to nature, a culture that entertains a lot of manual and artisan work, that kept their religious beliefs, and in a way remains somewhat untouched or unfazed by the ever-changing hyper-technological world that was already alive by the 70s and 80s when many of these photos were taken. That is why I find interesting the way these characteristics are manifested in the elements the photographer uses in his storytelling. First, I'd like to talk about distance and perspective. When I look at these photos, I'm blown away by the amazing color splashes they represent, but more importantly, I realized in comparison with the photos of Italy, that Barbey takes a more contemplative approach, imposing a distance between him and his subjects, adopting different perspectives, often from very high angles. I feel like this is the way he found to communicate not only how he felt, but also how he saw Moroccan society. The harmony that he described having found in it materialized itself in these images through perspective and distance, which in my eyes create an idea of labyrinth. There's several examples where we see people through a gap in a wall. There's the idea of a frame within a frame. These people are often covering their faces. They're not looking directly at us. And I also believe, on another note, that shadows play an important role in establishing this labyrinthic perspective in a way that shadows hide details and create or give these images different layers. Now, I know a lot of you are very interested in gear, and sometimes you ask me in the comment section what gear was this photographer using. In this case, I can tell you that I did a little bit of research on that. Bruno Barbey, during the beginning of his career, and I think through the mid of his career, he seemed to really enjoy working with Leica rangefinders. In particular, I found photos and descriptions of the Leica M2, which he paired very often with a 28mm and a 35mm. So it's very interesting, very different cameras, very different workflows. And on that note, I wanted to let you know as well that if you're interested in these cameras, if you're interested, in maybe perhaps trading these cameras or acquiring these cameras, or you have them sitting on your shelf and you just want to get rid of them, you can do so by visiting mpb.com. The partners of the channel, they've been partners of the channel for a really long time, and I really appreciate that. Say I have a Canon Mark III and I want to upgrade to a Canon Mark IV, so I go here. Basically, I have access to the list of Canon Mark IV bodies that they have, 5D Mark IVs, and say I can click on it and see the shutter count, I can see the condition, I can see images of the camera, I can see what's included, and in what's included on that tab, there's a 6-month warranty, which gives me, and I believe other people as well, some peace of mind when buying something. So I think this is super important to refer. And of course, if you're selling to them or trading, you can have a look at their catalog. Is constantly being updated with new stuff, video equipment, photography equipment, studio equipment, all sorts of things that you obviously will find a use for, depending on what type of photography you do. So I definitely recommend MPB if you'd like to check it out. Links will be down below. And now let's go back to the video. And of course, I'd like to thank them for kindly sponsoring this segment. But now I wanted to bring us to a third project, and this is a completely different culture and a completely different spirit, I feel. This particular project is titled The Color of China. And it's about a collection of photos that was, it's actually the title of the book that was later put together, with photos taken in China from 1973 all the way to 2018. So I feel like it's a voyage in space, but also in time. And so the concept at stake here is that of visual memory. And connecting this with storytelling, I believe that what we as photographers can learn through these images is that for an effective storytelling, we have to know extremely well our subjects or the themes we want to talk about in the context in which we're photographing, so that we can recognize the pivotal characteristics, behaviors, and details that we need to bring forward in our project. While I'm not an expert in China, Chinese culture, and the depiction of Chinese people in photography by Western photographers, I know, for instance, of the images of Cartier-Bresson, but I wouldn't consider myself an expert. But what I can say, based on what I've seen so far, is that I believe that Bruno Barbey's images come as a portrayal that goes beyond appearances. I mean, the message, if you will, resides in its own title. Whether that was intended or not, the color of China, we can see it as using the word color because the photographer was in fact photographing in color, but we can also interpret this color metaphorically as referring to the soul of a nation. In this aspect, I believe Barbey does a great job of capturing moments that highlight the themes that we could associate with Chinese culture. The themes of family and communion, the sense of community and union amongst the Chinese people, the sense of order and discipline, and the importance of achievement, the acknowledgement of work as a badge of one's pride and honor, and also a certain simplicity of life. In this particular case of projects that are documentary, that we need to spend time with our subjects and etc., I think we need to have a great ability not only to perceive the subject and the characteristics that they have, but also like how to go around and highlighting them. And so in many of these photos, we have the perception of community through the numbers, through the spaces that he chooses to photograph, and also through the tightness of space highlights this idea of community, at least. Or maybe I'm reading it wrong, but it's just my personal opinion, and I feel like that's what we can take from these photos. But talking about this, taking things from Bruno Barbey's work, these of course are brief lessons that we can take from his work. But if you want me to go deeper on his work and perhaps pick up one of his books and talk about it here on the channel, as I usually do on my photography books videos, you're more than welcome to jump in at the pinned comment, where I'll have a poll with different options, and you can choose the option that you'd like me to talk about. So basically the different options will be different books that he has put together over time. And so we'll pick a book and we'll bring it to the channel. We'll talk about that book. We'll talk about the lessons that we can take from that book. And if you like those types of videos, I've recently done one on Eugene Smith and his unfinished Pittsburgh project that you can check it out somewhere right here. I'll leave a link. But that has been all for today. I really appreciate you for watching, for supporting the channel. And yeah, I guess that, I would like to thank as well MPB for kindly sponsoring today's video. Really appreciate it. Don't forget to check it out. Links will be down below, and links for the podcast as well, and other stuff that you might have interest in checking out. And as always, I appreciate your time. I hope we can see each other very soon. So take care, stay safe, keep shooting, keep creating, keep learning photography, and I'm out.